Live from the TV30 studio, here is Jim Schneider.
Well, hi and welcome to inFocus. Thank you for joining us. Friends, there's much going on in our state right now that we want to bring to your attention to stay abreast of critical matters. We are just 2 weeks away from an important primary election here in the state of Wisconsin. What's on the ballot? We'll be talking about that this evening. We'll also be taking a look at the budget. Proposed budget needs to come forth from the governor and to the state. The governor's addressing the state to his budget address and making his priorities known through that. And also we understand that there are a number of legislative issues underway, and so we'll be talking about that tonight as well, and we hope you'll stay tuned. Joining us, we welcome back to our studio Daniel Degner, president of Wisconsin Family Council. Daniel, good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jim, and just a greeting as well from Sam. They're really excited to be with their beautiful baby girl.
Wonderful. Praise the Lord for that. Daniel, for those who have never heard of Wisconsin Family Council before, tell us about your organization.
Yeah, we are the only evangelical group in our state capital making an impact, and so we exist to strengthen, preserve, and promote Judeo-Christian values that advance marriage, family, life, and religious liberty in Wisconsin. And we are striving, our vision is that we see a Wisconsin where God is honored, life is cherished, families thrive, and religious freedom flourishes.
Now, this is not a message that people are going to get from the legacy media here in the state of Wisconsin.
Oh, absolutely, and especially when I think about our sister organization, Wisconsin Family Action, our lobbying group is ultimately, at the end of the day, legislators are going to hear from someone. And why wouldn't we fill that void with evangelical Christians that are promoting biblical and godly values? And it's even for our Church Ambassador Network on our C3 side, Wisconsin Family Council, the importance of that ministry, bringing pastors to the Capitol, to pour into these legislators, to minister to them as people, as individuals made in the image of God who need Jesus as their Lord and Savior, as shepherds, as leaders of our state, but also as partners, that they would be able to see local churches around Wisconsin as a primary resource to solve our needs.
Also, the interests that you represent are totally contrary to what, like I say, what the media represents, and they're not going to be getting the story through the media, but they can get it from Wisconsin Family Council. You have a system set up where people can stay alert to what's happening.
Oh, absolutely. And when I think about all the communications we do, we have a lot of just different things that we're pushing out there and pumping out there. But if people want to sign up at wifamilycouncil.org, you can get my weekly president's email that goes out on Tuesdays. We send a Thursday email that talks about different articles, different things going on in the state that people should be aware of. And then we even do daily radio with VCY. Jolene does a daily minute. Mm-hmm. We do a weekly commentary, a 5-minute. Then we also do Homefront, which is 15 minutes on Thursdays on VCY.
Every Thursday afternoon on WVCY Radio here in Southeast Wisconsin, 107.7 FM, you'll get these updates from Wisconsin Family Council. He gave that web address pretty quickly here, but friends, write it down and sign up to be informed. wifamilycouncil.org, wifamilycouncil.org, and you can also reach out to them by phone with your questions, and that number 1-888-378-7395. Well, we've got a whole lot of information to break down. Last week we were talking about a number of matters. New president and put in. We talked about the State of the State speech, but one of the issues that will be coming up soon is the budget. And matter of fact, the legislators are just enthralled with the proposals coming from the governor. Promises to pull out these policy pieces from it. Talk about the budget and its importance.
Yeah, so the budget for the state of Wisconsin really is the most important thing that the legislature does. And if you've been following the saga in the state of Wisconsin over the last 6 years, it's really been a tough process for Republicans to be able to work with the governor. And part of it is the governor hasn't helped himself by being trustworthy and really being an honest character when it comes to this budget process. And a clear example, this was in the last legislative budget. There was different numbers where it said 2023 to 2025 and 2025 to 2027, and he cut those numbers out so that it basically said we have a tax increase for the next 420 some years. And that had no absolutely intent with the legislature, what they had intended, but it was a line item veto that he used to really try to swindle and sway away that that legislative intent. And so it'll be really interesting to see what this upcoming budget is. As we've spoken with many of the Senate leads and the Republican Assembly leaders in Joint Finance, they don't even know how to craft a budget because of this. And right now they're waiting on, again, we're going to talk about the state Supreme Court later, but the state Supreme Court is going to have to decide whether or not the governor can just create a 420-year tax increase out of a budget that had no intent to do that whatsoever. It was just a 2 to a 4-year increase. And so that will be a big impact, and even if they can draft a budget before the deadline on June 30th. And the nice part about the budget here in Wisconsin compared to a federal budget per se is that if the legislature and the governor cannot come to an agreement to pass a budget, we just have the same numbers from the previous budget in the last legislative session. So there's no government shutdown here in Wisconsin, but there definitely won't be any increases, which the governor definitely wants lots of spending increases.
Sure. Some have called this, the Vanna White vetoes and so forth. Can he really do this? Is this being challenged? Has anybody challenged this? I mean, you mentioned that it was not the intent of the legislature to bring about a 400-some-year tax increase for the school systems. Where does this stand?
Yeah, and this has been just a long, drawn-out battle in the state of Wisconsin in our history. Governor Tommy Thompson was well known for being able to cut lines and cut sentences together to try to make something say that it didn't intend to. And so the people then, they came through a constitutional amendment to limit some of those powers. And so what that's changed to is it has to be on the same sort of item, the same sort of issue. But still with it, there still is uncertainty, and we'll see how the state Supreme Court really determines what they decide in this upcoming case that will determine whether or not the governor has that unilateral authority to create a 400-plus-year tax increase, or if he has to really follow the legislature's intent.
Governor Evers has been promoting what's called a citizen-led binding referendum. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I would say the citizen-led binding referendum, it really just goes back to this concern that we have that the governor doesn't really support our Constitution. He doesn't want to promote our Constitution. In America and in Wisconsin, we love that we have a constitutional republic. We are able to have through a direct democracy, be able to elect representatives to represent us. And we don't need to have necessarily a referendum on each and every single issue come through the people, but we elect people to handle those issues. But our concern as an organization is that what Governor Evers would do with this is he's going to try to promote issues like abortion through 8 to 9 months of pregnancy. We're concerned that he's going to do this to harm families by pushing recreational marijuana throughout our state. And really, if this year is supposed to be the year of the kid, why would he be trying to promote these sort of policies that really harm the kid? But my broader concern for this too is I don't think the governor knows what he's asking for with this, because if he's going to do those things, groups like ours are going to go around the state, and we are going to then start and lead binding referendums to not allow transgender surgeries on minors and also to protect women in sports.
You know, it's amazing he's pushing for this, and we've seen a lot of fraud unfold. Florida recently had that referendum take place there on abortion, and as the aftermath now shows that there was a lot of fraud even in putting that together, and the misinformation. Look at California. They have long ballots with all these different initiatives on there, and when you have dark money and special interest groups that have been involved in some of these things, their outcome is not really in the best interest of the public.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of California, I know many of the Wisconsinites I talk to around the state, they want Wisconsin politics to be funded, to be ran by, to even be talked through by Wisconsinites. And we see time and time again, California and New York and Illinois, they've realized that those elections there aren't as close or as important, and they keep funneling tons and tons of money here in Wisconsin to really impact our elections.
The leadership of the legislature has indicated that we're going to be stripping policy issues. Governor Evers likes to put many policy issues that don't deal with dollars and cents into his budgets.
Yeah, and Governor Evers has been doing this every single legislative budget that's come up, and for some reason he thinks that this is the place for us to bring recreational marijuana to Wisconsin, or he thinks this is the place where we give illegal immigrants driver's licenses, things that really have nothing to do with our budget at all. And this isn't necessarily something that's just new with this Republican legislature, but this has been the habit and policy of our state legislature for hundreds of years. And we as a state, we do not do policy items in our budgets. We do budget items in our budget, and we discuss public policy through single issue votes and bills.
So the process, the governor introduces a budget, then the legislature, joint finance takes it up and hold public hearings. And I guess what we've observed over the last several sessions is it's a complete rewrite of the budget.
Oh yeah, and especially we see this, the state superintendent of public instruction, she's even called for, with the governor's budget request coming up, for a $4 billion increase for state education. And we see this every time is the governor comes in and says, here's what we're going to do to have tons and tons of spending to give every sort of liberal wish group anything that they want for special interest. But then ultimately the legislature has to be the adults in the room and says it is time for us to make sure that we do not raise taxes 10, 20, 30% on our state, but we need to really be able to support Wisconsin families by maintaining taxes or even by cutting taxes. And so really when it's all said and done, the legislature really does do a total revamp of the governor's just really silly waste and spend tax proposals.
Daniel Degner with us from Wisconsin Family Council and talking about public policy issues here in the state of Wisconsin. There is, we have a governor then who will take things that he's not getting through in his budget and he'll make rules, make policies for them, and all of a sudden put them out there. And the legislature has power to put the brakes on those things. And we understand we're in a battle right now because there's a case that just went before the Wisconsin Supreme Court recently, Markline v. Evers, and this is dealing with this aspect. Who's got the power and control over this? Explain what this case is about.
Yeah, and so we've unfortunately seen this with administrative state, as the administrative state, especially under Democrat governors or presidents, they just want to take all of the authority away from the legislature and from we the people, but they just want to be able to create rules and create laws on their own. And the way they'll get around is they'll say, well, we're not changing the law, but we're changing the rule. And one of the areas we've seen this is through one of the administrative arms that the governor leads, where he has tried to make it every single legislative session since he's been governor to make it illegal for licensed counselors to be able to counsel kids struggling with gender dysphoria, to be able to say, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but we want to tell you that you are really a boy or you are really a girl. And how do we help you deal with these underlying issues that you have? Instead, the governor has said through this administrative state, no, as a licensed counselor, we are going to try to take away your license unless you promote a transgender ideology onto that young person. And so what's happened is, as the governor's tried to force these through the rules process, the legislature, thankfully over the last few legislative sessions, has put a stop to it. They've been able to hold hearings and be able to say, no, the governor can't just do this through a temporary injunction. But unfortunately, right now, the law of the land, because the governor did this again, this new legislative session, is that right now for counselors, licensed counselors, whether they're Christian or non-Christians, by law, they're being required to promote a transgender ideology on those that are struggling with gender dysphoria. And we just think this is ridiculous, this is wrong. If you want to make that sort of legislative policy change, do it through the state legislature.
Right.
Don't do it through an administrative rules process. And so right now the court is waiting to make a decision on whether or not the governor has that authority. And our concern is with this liberal state Supreme Court, if they take away any sort of rules processes away from the legislature, it will give that executive branch of that administrative state unlimited authority, unlimited power, no checks and balances. We might as well not even have a legislature after that point.
Wow. Critical case, Supreme Court case right now. Really takes us into our next subject, and that is our elections here this spring. We are 2 weeks away from our spring primary right now in the state of Wisconsin, February 18th, and that's going to catapult us to the April 1st general spring election. Talk about these two elections, if you would.
Yeah, so we'll start off with the superintendent of public instruction. That race is really heating up. It's really interesting to kind of watch and see. So you have Democrat endorsed Jill Underly. She's the incumbent of DPI. She's done a lot over her tenure to really lower our academic standards in Wisconsin. She's done a lot to promote transgender ideology throughout our state and has really spoken negatively against choice schools. And normally we would assume that she would have the support of someone like Democrat Governor Tony Evers, who held that position before she did. But he's come off and said that he's not endorsing anyone until after the primary. The second candidate is Jeff Wright. Jeff Wright is endorsed by the Liberal Wisconsin's Teachers Union, and he's made sure too that he's going to really do what he can to really be against school choice and to really promote a liberal ideology throughout our school system here in Wisconsin.
We have a lot of viewers that have children or grandchildren in the school choice program.
Oh, absolutely. And our concern, especially when it comes to the Supreme Court race and the DPI race, is if we do not get good candidates in these seats, that really the school choice program may be in jeopardy in the long term.
Okay, so he is endorsed by the leftist teachers union. Normally the Democratic Party and they are on the same page.
Yep.
But in this case, our present incumbent is not radical left enough.
Yep. Yeah. Basically, Jill Underly, who's from our perspective is very far to the left, was not viewed as left enough by the teachers union. That's why they're endorsing and supporting Jeff Wright. And then there's a third candidate. Her name is Brittany Kinzer. She has an education. She has a special education background, and she even has worked with Milwaukee charter schools in the past. And so she self-proclaims herself as a blue dog Democrat. There's no candidate in this race that I would say they're a strong defender and champion of biblical values. But I would say there's definitely differences on how each of the three would view the school choice program.
Okay, so these three candidates are on your ballot that just 2 weeks away. And let me just mention that whoever two come through this will advance to the April election. That is the only statewide issue that is on this ballot. Now you're going to have likely local issues. You might have local school board seats or other municipal matters on your ballot. Might even have some referendum questions. To find out what's on your ballot for this February 18th election, the primary, go to myvote.wi.gov. myvote.wi.gov. Click on what's on my ballot, and you'll put in your address, and you can see everything that's on your ballot. For some, this will be the only thing on your ballot for this election. Others will have various things depending upon where you live. Now, it's critically important to check that out and to participate in the election coming up on February 18th. There's another election coming forward, but before we hit that, Daniel, early voting is underway in the state of Wisconsin as well. Yeah,
and for some it can feel like, wow, this was fast. We just went through early voting back in November, and now it's already here again. And the one thing I'll just say, just a thank you to your viewers as well as our audience around the state. We did a post-election analysis after the November election. We found that 55% of the audience that we reach out to at the Wisconsin Family Council voted early. And we were really encouraged because back in 2016, 2020, we weren't sure necessarily how Christian conservatives would vote. And there was a big push by President Trump as well as others to make sure that we're voting early to lock those votes. And we were encouraged to see that. And we hope to see a continuation of that with this election here in February, but also continuing into April. And so we encourage you to reach out to your local municipal clerk to see what early voting options look like in your community, even today if you're able to, or tomorrow.
Right, okay, so again, February 18th is a primary election, and that's going to catapult us then to April 1st.
Yep, and that April 1st election, we don't say this lightly as an organization. We often hear these things of this is the most important election of our lifetimes, but I would say that this truly could be, and if not, it's definitely of the decade. If conservatives do not win the state Supreme Court this election, the next opportunity they will have to do so is in 2028. But given they would have to win in 26 and 27 to even have an opportunity to take back control of the court in 2028. And there's just a lot of cases that this liberal Supreme Court has already decided that is very scary. One of the amicus briefs we recently signed on to at the national level was because the state Supreme Court said that Catholic Charities is not a ministry because they serve those who aren't Catholics. Well, for us as evangelicals, we serve people through our poverty ministries or through our homeless ministries or through our prison ministries who we're sharing the gospel with. They may not know Jesus. And so according to that same ruling, we're concerned that this liberal state Supreme Court might even say that, well, we don't qualify as a ministry unless we only serve those within our congregations. And that really impacts the gospel. But we're concerned when it comes...
Go ye into all the world, the scripture says.
Absolutely. And it also impacts these transgender issues. We're also concerned that the court is already also going to try to create a constitutional right to abortion in Wisconsin. We've seen already with them throwing these legislative maps on the new legislature. They're really intent with this is to try to create a unified government under far left Democrat control here in Wisconsin. And so if we want to have any sort of going back to the rule of law in Wisconsin, we need to make sure that court stays with a conservative majority.
We in essence have a legislative Supreme Court right now.
Yeah, absolutely. They're a legislative Supreme Court. They are not there in order to promote what is the rule of law. They're there to advance policy agendas. We saw this in the last state Supreme Court election where the liberal candidate Janet Protasiewicz came out in support of abortion rights. And I was just even amazed when we had National Sanctity of Life Day. We were reminded of the 52nd anniversary of Roe versus Wade happening. And what did Susan Crawford, the liberal candidate, come out and do? She said she would do everything in her power to advance abortion rights in Wisconsin. Wow. This is not a court that's looking and saying, what can we do to uphold the rule of law? They are blatantly saying they're going to advance abortion issues. Yeah. They're blatantly saying they're going to advance transgender issues. They are not there to uphold the rule of law. They are there to legislate policy from a far left perspective.
So much for the separation of powers.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate the state that we're in.
So again, that will be on the April 1st ballot, and also on the April 1st ballot, friends, be alert, because there is going to be a question on the ballot that is going to change the Wisconsin state constitution, dealing with voter ID.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of go in and explain how these referendums work. And so part of it, too, is sometimes these referendums can come in because the governor will veto a bill. Thankfully, in Wisconsin, voter ID was passed under law during the Walker administration. But what has to happen is the legislature has to approve a joint resolution in one session, and then in the next session, they have to come back and approve the same language in that same resolution. So they've done that already for this April one, and this would enshrine voter ID into our state constitution. And so some might ask, and what some liberals are arguing is, well, voter ID is already a law in Wisconsin. You don't need to do that. But I'll explain exactly why we need to do that. The liberal Supreme Court candidate, Susan Crawford, was an attorney who fought against voter ID. She tried to make it so that voter ID could not be the law of the land in Wisconsin. And so she hasn't necessarily publicly come out and said that she would oppose voter ID if it came to the court, but based off of her experience and background as an attorney, it sure seems that she would do everything she can to ensure that voter ID is thrown out of the law of the land of the state of Wisconsin.
So friends, keep in mind that will be on the April 1st ballot, the constitutional question. The February ballot, again, just 2 weeks from now, is going to be that which is the superintendent of public instruction and any multi-contested races in your municipality. Could have some referendum questions there. Go to myvote.wi.gov, click on what's on my ballot. That will be updated then after that election for the April 1st election, and that referenda question will be there for changing the Supreme Court, amending the state constitution. That will be there, as well as the Supreme Court race will be on the April 1st ballot. As you take a look at Wisconsin Family Council and your sister organization, Wisconsin Family Action, what are your goals for this legislative session? Because there is so much in the mix here at this time. What is it that you're advocating for at this point?
Yeah, we'll go some high-level bills that we're looking at. We do think some of these bills can be signed by our governor, but the first one that we believe can be signed by our governor is an age verification bill. And so this is started in the state of Louisiana. 19 states now across our country have this as the law of the land, but in Wisconsin, we require an ID to buy things like tobacco or to buy alcohol, but we don't require an ID to view pornography or to view these illicit, explicit materials. And ultimately, we've seen that this is harming marriages, this is harming families, and it's also creating these addictive tendencies with these young children. And so we want to protect minors by making it so that they have to be able to verify an ID to use these pornography websites or these explicit materials. And thankfully, within other states that this has happened, in Louisiana, for example, we saw that these major providers, their traffic dropped by over 80%.
That's amazing.
And so it's just a great way to help protect minors, but also...
But how scary to think that many minors are accessing these porn sites.
Yeah, and from what the research that we've seen is the average age of exposure is at 13. And even just looking at my own story, when I was a kid, I was 6 years old the first time I was exposed to illicit materials while I was at a friend's house, and there was an older sibling who had turned it onto a computer. And we're seeing that, especially as kids see it at a younger and younger age, it causes more harm for them as they get older.
So Daniel, we require the photo ID to get a library card. If we get rid of our waste motor oil at a recycle place, we have to show photo ID for that. Should we not have to prove age verification for that which is going to damage somebody mentally, physically as well?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's our argument with it too. And I've been very encouraged, especially with Governor Evers saying that 2025 is going to be the year of the kid. This is a great example for him to prove and to show that by signing this bill into law. We're really encouraged. I had a meeting a couple weeks ago with the Speaker of our State Assembly, Robin Voss, and he's very supportive of this bill. And it does seem like the State Assembly is going to do it, but we have to make sure there's some members of our State Senate that have some concerns that we want to address, because we want to make sure we get this through the state legislature, that we can get the governor to sign this bill. And I think this is really a great opportunity to have a win for the legislature as well as the governor in protecting kids around our state.
Okay. Well, what else is on your hope to list for this spring?
Well, the next is a hope to, but I don't think, unfortunately, the governor will sign it, but it's important to make sure that this is out in the public. The first one is ensuring that minors cannot get transgender surgeries here in Wisconsin, as well as puberty blockers. We see that this is irreparable harm to these minors.
Right.
And we want to make sure that we're protecting them and they're not making this life-altering decision before their minds are fully and their brains are fully developed. And the other issue is protecting women in sports and ensuring that men are not competing with biological women and causing harm to them, but also taking away scholarship opportunities and all those other things. But unfortunately, at the State of the State a couple weeks ago, the governor was very clear that he's going to veto anything that disrupts the transgender ideology.
You know, and that is so harmful to girls. I mean, decimating girls' sports, how he's crushing them. The year of the kid, he's calling it, and yet these kids, he's crushing their hopes and aspirations. Some records are being taken away from these young people as well.
Yeah, and it's just unfortunate to see that instead of going there to protect the foundations of Title IX, going there to protect women to make sure they have equal access, we're continuing to give access to those that are born as biological men. Just some other things that we're going to be working on too. We talked about the budget a little bit earlier, but we want to ensure, the governor vetoed this the last time, of course, but to provide a marriage penalty tax credit. Right now, that tax credit's about $470. It hasn't been increased in over 20 years. We want to be able to promote marriage in our state by providing tax credit incentives for those that get married. And just some of the other things that we're looking at when we're speaking of broader family sort of policy. One of the things that we're looking at is looking at financial assistance for adoption. Right now, at the floor level, adoption costs about $25,000. To get licensed for adoption in Wisconsin, it's about $5,000 to $10,000. So this financial assistance grant would help pay for the licensing for us to promote adoption throughout our state. And we think that's another bill that the governor is very likely to sign on to if we can get it through the State Assembly as well as the State Senate. And we have heard Democrats in the state legislature that have interest in a bill like that.
Wow. Daniel, we're going to have to leave it there tonight, but thank you for being with us and joining us here on inFocus about some very critical legislative issues.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And friends, let me encourage you again to reach out to Wisconsin Family Council. If you want to stay informed, you're hearing things tonight you're not going to get from other media here in the community. But to stay informed, connect with them. wifamilycouncil.org. wifamilycouncil.org, and sign up to get their emails and information on issues. Also, reach out to them by phone, 1-888-378-7395. 1-888-378-7395. But to be informed, this organization is there serving you, and they've got the information, but as they say, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Let me also just again remind you, we're 2 weeks away from the primary in the state of Wisconsin. Coming up here on February 18th, a critical primary with many issues. For you to be informed, cast a prayerful vote. Visit that site, myvote.wi.gov, critical information. Our time's gone. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight on inFocus. Good night.